All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm using just flanged nuts, and it's just some that I have here. They're just zinc or CAD plated, you know what I mean? So I took them to the wire wheel and took the coating off of them. So anyway, I'm just going to weld those up to the inner fender, but I need to take those aluminum clamps off there because I don't want any heat to get to them clamps and, you know, melt them or do something stupid to them. So I'll pretty much just take the clamp off and then just run a bolt down in there to hold this tight to the inner fender, and then I'll run a stitch weld around, or, you know, tacks, not stitches, but you get what I'm saying. Then I got to figure out my windshield washer pump placement and get it on there, and then, you know, weld 2 nuts for the mounting for the back of that, and then also drill a hole over here for rubber grommet. So I have to go through my rubber grommet bucket here, which I've got a ton of stuff to choose from. So I got to find some rubber grommets that fit the windshield washer hose, which comes in the kit. This is the number for the windshield washer pump motor, if you're planning on doing it that way. Now, if you go to playlist on my channel, you will find a video in that playlist for Tri-5 Tech Tips, and there is a video just on converting an old school glass windshield washer jar to this Anco electric universal pump to make it all work. But you don't get enough hose, you know what I mean? So you'll have to go to the parts store and get more hose to do it the way I'm doing it. But hose is not that expensive. But so my little fine tip Sharpies, which this is a big pack of the regular size markers, but it has 2 black fine tips down here. I like this ultra fine tip for my fabrication stuff because, like, if I draw a cut line, if I use a regular marker, it has a wide line, so I have a tendency to, you know, not get it quite as straight of a cut as I do with a finer line to go to, especially if you're cut something wide and then you go back to grind it in to get right on that line. You have a really small line to go to, so you don't get as much rippliness to it. But I went to my local Dollar General because I have one over here by my house, and they were out of the fine tip Sharpies. The slot was empty on the shelf. So I looked around in case somebody picked one up and laid it down on the shelf or something, because these were on a peg. But anyway, up above on the top was big boxes of their extra stuff, and I seen this hanging out. It was upside down facing me when I looked up, and I pulled that whole box down, and it was just a bunch of random Sharpie stuff in there. There was 2 of these in that box, and I was like, dang, I bet this is expensive. I don't want to pay a whole bunch of money just to have the fine tip Sharpie, because mine dried out. It's done. I threw it away, so I need a new one. So I carried this up front, and I asked the guy, I said, how much is this? And he scanned it, and he said it's $1. And I was like, are you kidding me? He goes, that's what it scanned up as. And he goes, it must be discontinued or something. And I was like, okay. I said, I want the other one too. There's another one. He goes, go get it. So I got these for $1 a piece. So I think that's pretty awesome. I got these big multi-packs, so now I have 4 fine tip Sharpies, and I got them cheaper than what I would have cost me just to buy a 2-pack like at Walmart. It's like $3 or $4 for a 2-pack or more. I don't know what they are actually for just 2, but I thought that was pretty funny. So got me an extra pack. So I think I'm gonna swipe out the 2 fine tips, and I might give these to my mom, because she always does stuff with arts and crafts, so she may find a use for those, who knows. I'm going to do some welding here. I've got my nuts run down. So these bolts I'm using are way long, but it's all I've got for, these are just Phillips screws that I'm not going to use, so in case they, you know, get slag or something stupid happens to them while I'm welding them, I'm not ruining one of my button heads, but all I've got is longer hardware. So I'm going to weld these nuts to the inner fender. That way they're permanently installed. Now I'm trying to figure out my placement. So my washer pump is going to go there. I'm going to drill a hole somewhere in here, and I'm going to put a rubber grommet on it, or in it, and the hose coming from the washer pump will come through that rubber grommet and then up, and then I'm going to weld some stainless steel 1/4x20 bolts here. Weld one about in here, the other one about here, and the other one about in here. And then I'm going to drill a hole here, put a rubber grommet in for the hose to pass through. So the 3 bolts that I'm welding to this is basically just going to be welded on there for studs, so I can use these rubber lined loom clamps that slip onto the bolts, and then I'm going to use some stainless steel nylon lock nuts on them. And that's basically what's going to run the hose all the way to the wiper extension tubes. So that hose will be routed out and up along here on the back. So, you know, I don't really care about the back side of this. It's going to get raptor lined, and nobody's going to be laying down on the ground looking up in here at how that stuff was done anyway. So I don't mind just welding the heads on there. Doesn't bother me a bit. But I've had to dig everything out. I had to dig out 3 of matching grommets, and then I had to dig out 3 matching loom clamps, 3 matching nuts, and I couldn't find 3 matching 1/4x20 stainless steel bolts. This one's too long, so I'm gonna have to cut it down. I'm gonna weld it on and then run a nut down on it and then cut it off and then file the end a little bit and chamfer it on the ends a little bit and then pull the nut off. But anyway, I'll end up making this one that length. Instead of going to the hardware store just to get, you know, one stupid bolt, I'll just cut down longer ones that I have. But I had to dig through all that, and I got all kinds of those loom clamps in there, so it took a little bit just to gather up all the parts and pieces. But it is nice having excess, you know, hardware stuff that I can dig through and, you know, find something that I like. But I do like my stuff to match, you know what I mean? I can't stand to have stuff that does not match, but I would get over it if I had to, you know what I mean? I'd get over it pretty quick, actually. Alright, so this has turned into a real fiasco here. So trying to figure out how to route this stuff is, you know, basically running it the way factory did it. But the factory had one of these metal clips right here. So you have 2 separate harnesses going on here. You've got headlight, and then you've got your turn signal going down here. So it's 2 separate, it'll be 2 separate in these separate looms. So I can tell you for sure, if this inner fender didn't have a notch in it, you know, coming out like this, and a hole, I would probably go in there and cut all this out, reshape it smooth where it's nothing there, and just take everything into there, and then just drop the turn signal stuff down to the turn signal. But instead of going through all that, I'm going to use the existing hole, weld a nut to the backside for this to clip on. But I want this stuff, you know, nice curve. I don't want it in and tight and over like that factory clamp would have had this going like this. So I don't want that. Now you also don't want this super loose where when you're driving down the road and you got all that air coming through the front of the car, it's going to make stuff move around. There was nothing here. There was no holes or anything. I drilled this hole because just going from here to up here, there's nothing there. And you know, I would need a double clamp system to do both, which is kind of overkill at that point. But when you use this braided loom and there's wires in it, it's pretty firm. It's not like it's going to flex around and move and all that kind of stuff. So I think I'm just going to weld this one up solid and grind it down smooth. There doesn't need to be a clamp here. And then once some rubber grommets are in there, this will be a lot more firm, and I just want everything kind of curved out a little bit nicer. You know what I mean? So I'm just going to leave this the way it is and just add a clamp there, but that is pretty much how I'm going to route the wiring at the front. I mean, it's cleaner than stock, but it's still pretty, I don't really love it, you know what I mean? And again, if I went in and cut all this stuff out and did a new piece, you know, that just had that same contour as this down here and put it up there, it would be a lot better. And then I could just run everything in and down that way, which is exactly how I did the hardtop. There's, you know, none of that stuff's there. I even welded up this hole, and I drilled the same size hole as this right in here on the center fender, and I used the factory replacement grommet in here. So the core support is a hollow channel, so my wiring harness basically goes across the core support underneath from that grommet. Everything, all the wiring on my hardtop's on the inside. So there's none of this hanging out in the wind, you know what I mean? You don't see none of it. But with this being an original looking car, I'm not going for original. I'm going for the original look, so I don't mind so much this part of it. But I'm kind of wishing now I would have went a little bit higher up with that clamp, just a little bit. But I think it'll be fine. I didn't want any of it to be kinked. I don't want any of it looking hard 90'd. I just don't think that looks good with that braid. I like that braid to be, you know, just smooth looking. So, yeah, I'm over explaining myself again. That's the way I'm doing it. Oh, I might add that the way this is crazy. When you put the bolt in that clamp, the bolt does not go in on the flat side of the clamp out the back. It actually comes out at an angle, if you can see that. So you can't get that straight with this resting flat against the metal. It makes this bolt come out crooked. So you'd have to go down a size on your bolt. And when you do that, the bolt looks way too small for the clamp. So what I ended up doing was I clamped the edge of some stainless steel serrated flange nuts, and I angle ground that side, and then used an Allen wrench and ran that Allen bolt down and tightened that on that plane the way it is. So, I mean, it's kind of goofy, but you don't notice the bolt being crooked up here. You know what I mean? And this is all that matters, because nobody's really going to see the backside anyway. Okay, I'm done. Alright, so I got the windshield washer pump motor mounted. Drilled a hole in the inner fender, I put a rubber grommet in it. I've got the hose coming off of it and kind of curving back into the inner fender, which I think looks kind of neat. And then it comes out and goes up here in these loom clamps that'll be held on by these bolts that I welded on. And it'll come up and go in right here to a hole. I'm going to bolt this into the fender, at least put a couple of bolts in it, and I need to find out a good place to have that put in, because I don't exactly remember where I put it on the hard top. But anyway, that fender has a brace piece that comes around, and I don't want to have it in the way, so I'm going to pull the fender off the car and set this down in there and see where that goes, and I'll drill the hole for the grommet here. But you know, with the, I mean, there's lots of places you could put this. You know, like on the hard top, I have it stuffed kind of up underneath the top of the core support, and you don't really see it. If you're standing in front of the car, you don't really see it at all. But on this particular four-door, you know, I'm going for that original style. So, you know, original cars have stuff on the inner fenders, and so it just kind of goes along with the theme of it. Now I'm going to take off this sticker, and I'm going to put a little small GM sticker on here, an old school 50s GM sticker, which it's the same thing I did on the hardtop, and the sticker is actually from another windshield washer decal sticker, the GM logo in it right there. So that's what I did here. But anyway, I'll have to buy 2 of those, and I'll just cut it out and put it on that washer pump. But this one's up underneath, and when you're standing here, you can't see it. But anyway, I'm doing things a little bit differently on this car. The other side of it is it's going to be very easy to remove and replace if it's, you know, fails on us. Not like mine's going to be hard to replace. It's just I'll have to lean further over on the hardtop to change that one, whereas this one will be real simple. But I got the nuts welded in here. I got those 2 nuts welded on. I got the 2 nuts welded on here for the clamps. I forgot to weld that up. Dang it. So now I got to weld that up. I still haven't decided on the hardware here yet. I've talked about this where they're trying to make the bolts go this way by welding nuts to the back side of the inner fender. I haven't decided. Although the little tab is broke off of here, you can see the 2 shiny spots where the 2 spot welds, it was all that was left holding it. The top 2 were, you know, have been off for a while, but I just can't decide if I want to mess with all that or not. Not that it would take a long time to do, but it would be a little bit nicer when I'm running the wiring and stuff, so I didn't get up there and just, you know, cut my hand or something on those stupid bolts. But I kind of need to figure out what I'm going to do with the wiring on this, and I just haven't decided yet. I'll have to give that a little thought process as well. But I still need to build a bracket for the core support to mount the windshield washer pump to, or the washer bottle to. And then I'm obviously going to have to go to the parts store and get a whole bunch of this hose. But you know, it's when you're trying to figure out routing and stuff like that, you really got to put some thought into stuff, you know what I mean? And it is kind of difficult to do when everything's laying out on a table. You know, you don't have everything together as a whole to see what surprises may show up, you know what I mean? But, well, I went ahead and pulled these little plates off there. As you can see, they got 4 little spot welds on them. I just used a really sharp chisel and started it in the edge and hit it with a small hammer, and it pretty much knocked every one of them off without hardly any effort. So these actually come off pretty easy. But instead of, you know, this really coarse factory bolt that goes in from the back side of the inner fender into the engine compartment where you see the threads, I welded square nuts to the back side of the inner fender, and now I've got my stainless Allen buttons going in there. So that is a whole lot cleaner of an install there. I've got a for my 1/4-inch ratchet, I got a little Allen socket, you know, that fits these really well, and it doesn't get into this. So after everything's painted, I'll be able to, you know, put those in pretty easy. If I didn't have one, I'd have to use a regular old Allen wrench, you know, with the 90-degree bend, and sit there and do a little of it at a time. But fortunately, I have a tool that will work. That looks so much better, even though it is a little bit of a more difficult of an area to see. You know, if you're standing on one side of the car off to the side over here and the hood's up, you'll be able to see on the other side. So not that anybody be looking for it. To me, it's just cleaner, and that's why I did it. Okay, it's time to clean up the mess and put the car back in. I worked on it most of the day. I got quite a bit of stuff figured out, and I think that inner fender is done, other than welding up that hole that I forgot about 2 or 3 times. I forgot about that. What I got here, what I've been working on, is a mount for the windshield washer jar, and I'm just taking, I think that's 3/16 plate, but anyway, I drilled it and tapped it so some stainless button head Allens will fasten the bracket to this plate. And what I'm going to end up doing is drilling a couple holes in it, and it will end up mounting kind of like that to the back side part of the core support here. So that's about the location of the windshield washer jar, and this is clear of the fan shroud, so that'll pretty much go in there. So what I will do on the bracket itself, I've got this piece here that I cut out. I need to clean it up a little bit, but I will end up bending this into a 90, and I will weld it to this about in the middle somewhere, and the L bracket coming down this way, and it'll actually, the back of this will be on the baffle that's going to be on this side. So I will drill a hole in that and put a stainless Allen button through, and just maybe a nut on the back side. So it'll have, you know, I have a bracket out here on the outside supporting it, an L bracket, and this will be bolted to that. If I just bolted this to the core support, this would probably, you know, vibrate and rattle around. So I'm going to basically build an L bracket out of this, and I'll weld it all up and smooth it and everything so it looks like it was made onto that. But I'm gonna have to get the holes drilled in the core support, and I'm probably gonna weld some square nuts up in here. That way I can do it by myself without having to hold a wrench up in there and stuff. And this would be removable with the, you know, the radiator and the fan shroud and all that stuff's on. I wouldn't have a big mess to unbolt to try to get to the access to the nut. So that'll bolt on with 2 bolts, one up high, one down low, and then an L bracket going through to the baffle. So it'll have support on both sides, so it won't vibrate and rattle and do all that kind of silly stuff. So that'll end up being something kind of like that, which I think will be kind of cool. It's about pretty much the same thing I did to my hardtop. So I've got a huge mess to clean up out here, and my wife's already on her way home, so I've got a boogie. I've got to clean up that mess too. But I guess that's it for today, and it is supposed to rain tomorrow, so we're probably not going to be working on the car tomorrow. But anyway, guys, thanks for watching.